you so much for joining me on the Creative Awakening Now podcast. I'm your host, David Matters, and I'm here to bring you stories, interviews, and insights relating to the topics of creativity, inspiration, and practice. My intention is to connect with other people who employ a heart-centered approach to the artistic process and to share this profoundly inspiring content with anyone who cares to hear it. I hope you enjoy. This is a dream, and a dream is never the same. My guest this week was Marc Hennessey. Marc was 11 years old when he first picked up the violin and has been in a love affair with music ever since. He builds layers of sound using the violin, voice, and guitar in a process known as looping, which creates an array of melodies and harmonies. This is all done live without the use of any pre-recorded recordings or samples. To All My Dear Friends, which is the name that Marc performs under, was formed in November of 2008, but it wasn't until early 2009 that Marc started sharing this unique sound with the world. To All My Dear Friends has recorded 4 studio albums alongside many years of touring and performing, including a live album on the streets of Asheville, North Carolina. Marc is currently working on his 5th studio album. To All My Dear Friends has collaborated with many talented artists, including Grammy Award-winning engineer Malcolm Byrne, Calbi of Sterling Sound, the Houston Met, Nicole, Miglis of 100 Waters, and Hope Stone Dance. Music speaks a universal language, he says, that all people understand, inspiring and moving each of us. Sound and music can break down barriers, reaching a level that is beyond the mind. For all that humans have created and will create, music is perhaps one of our finest accomplishments. Playing music allows me to connect with people in ways that would not be possible through any other medium. Marc is passionate about cultivating positive transformation through his performances and hopes to bring healing to many through the music. He also incorporates his daily spiritual practice into his music, including the teachings of yoga, meditation, Sufism, Tai Chi, and Qigong. To All My Dear Friends strives to create musical experiences that rejuvenate, nourish, and soothe the soul, helping to return balance within. And our interview, we go into all this stuff in pretty deep detail, actually. We go into his music, obviously, and kind of break down what he does with his looping, his pedals. It's really incredible stuff. Like, his setup is it's insane. Just watching him work, I mean, he's literally dancing over the pedals as he goes along. And so we talk about all that. I mean, he gives us a little bit of a performance. He plays a couple songs. And yeah, we talk about like just the deeper connection of what music is, this universal language and what performance is, and when you're applying yourself in that way. And it happened we did this interview yesterday on Valentine's Day, and so we got into the subject of love, but love in the way of this love affair that he has with music and what that really means, and what it looks like in his life personally, professionally, spiritually, all these things. He's quite the guy, quite a conversation. Very, very easy and very fun to talk to. So I know you guys are going to love it. We go into some really awesome stuff. And actually, Marc and myself and a good friend who also was on this podcast a few episodes back, Forrest Bailey, we are all playing a show together at the Mothlight on April 16th, I believe. And I believe it's a Tuesday. I hope I get that right. And yeah, that's going to be super awesome. Just connecting with these guys personally and knowing that we're going to share the stage musically is super exciting for me. This is exactly what this podcast is about, building this community. I mean, it's not just about me getting shows with people, which is obviously nice, but it's just, it's bridging that gap. It's building community, and on a level of more than just creatively, artistically, but there's more. There's friendships involved, and there's communication, and these are just special things. So I'm really excited about that, and I hope you guys, if you're in the Asheville area and you're listening to this soon, you guys will come check out that show April 16th. And I hope you'll check out Marc's work. I'll put up the links in the show notes. I hope you'll check out everything I have going on at creativeawakeningnow.com. To my website, host all this stuff, and I got all kinds of stuff with my music from my band Life Like Water, blog posts. If you sign up for my mailing list, which I really hope you do, because I got a bunch of cool things coming up, you get a free copy of my ebook that I wrote and published a while back. And yeah, you can find all kinds of fun things in there. And like I keep saying, I do have some really great stuff coming up, and I'm slowly putting it together and leaking it out. And I'll keep you updated on all that. But thank you so much for listening, and I hope you really enjoy this episode. Oh, but before I go off on this ranting, please, if you want to support the podcast, please go to iTunes, leave a rating, leave a review. People keep telling me they love the show and they're excited about what I'm doing with it, but very few people are actually going and doing that. And I know how it works. You listen to podcasts, everyone says the same damn thing, but it really does make a big difference. So please, if you have the time, go over there, leave a rating, leave a review, leave some stars, whatever it is. Take a screenshot, share it on Facebook, share an episode that you like, tell people about it. It really, really helps. So that's that. Enjoy this episode. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And thank you, Marc, for agreeing to do this and having me over here and providing the Beanie Baby stuffed animal party and all that.
Thanks, David. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Awesome. Yeah. So this space that we're set up in right now, it's all your pedals are set up, the violin's set up, your amp's set up. We got all kinds of instruments surrounding us. It's definitely got like an inspirational vibe going on. And I always like to start out these talks just kind of getting a background history of your creative experience, from childhood, where it all began for you, and kind of how that's led up to where you are now, and then we get into the juicy stuff from there.
Cool. Sounds good. Gosh, as a child, where did it all begin? My mother and father once had sex.
I bet.
Actually, I grew up with two mothers, so I had a fascinating upbringing where I had two mothers and three sisters, one of which was my biological mother, and so I didn't really have my father in my life as a child, and it wasn't really a bad thing. There weren't many musicians around. I picked up the violin in all places in the 6th grade. I was 11 years old in the middle of the ghetto in a school that was probably 1% white down in Tampa, Florida, right outside of... I lived in Lutz, Florida. That's where I was born and raised. Okay. And so I picked the violin up in a very odd place. There was an after-school program for kids, and... in the middle of the ghetto, so I picked up the violin. Before that, though, I did tinker on the piano. Okay. I loved playing the piano as a kid. Yeah, I was just kind of gravitated towards it. I was the kid that listened to classical music on NPR. I didn't listen to the pop stations.
Nice.
So I was a weird one.
Nothing wrong with that. Yeah. And then you picked up the violin, and how old were you when you said you?
I was 11, so I've been playing for 22 years.
Oh wow, cool.
And I'm 33 now.
Nice. And was it immediately kind of like a love affair, like you knew it was your thing, or did it develop slowly? Or?
Well, I had to, yes, it was in a sense. I had to beg my parents, both my moms, to let me play for days. They finally caved in and rented me a violin. But to answer your question, spot on, especially because it's right around Valentine's Day right now, every single one of my exes has told me that they could never get as close to me as my violin did. So take that for what it's worth. I think I have a pretty healthy relationship with humans, but the music is very healing for me, and it's very much a part of who I am and what I do in this world. Yeah.
Were you initially playing classical music?
As a kid, I played a lot of classical music. I played in a symphony orchestra for a while, but then when I got into my late teens and early 20s, I started to like my cherry was popped. Got into Zeppelin and Santana. Santana taught me how to play a guitar solo, listening to his music, and trying to mimic it. So I do play the guitar on stage also with a looping violin, but oftentimes I just have the violin because I can do so much with it. And so in my early 20s, I learned every single Beatles song, listened to all the Zeppelin albums, really just went through the past, learned a lot about blues and jazz, and now I kind of create what I call a fusion of all that. My catchphrase I've been using, I probably need a new one by now, but I tell people that To All My Dear Friends is like Bach meets Talking Heads.
I saw that on your website, and after listening to your music, I was like, okay.
Yeah. People have told me, especially when I sing, that I sound a lot like Talking Heads song. So.
Do you sing a lot?
I do, and in fact, the reason you see my pedals set up right now, they're always set up, but I'm working on a new live sound. I'm working on a tour for this year, and I've got new material with a lot more singing. In recent years, a lot of people have seen me doing mostly instrumental music, and I love doing instrumental music, but there's a new chapter coming that's really powerful that I'm excited to share with the world.
Cool. Yeah. More songwriting?
A lot more songwriting. My neighbor right now is a famous songwriter named Billy Ed Wheeler, and I'm living in a cabin in Swannanoa where... that was his recording studio back in the 50s and 60s. And Billy Ed wrote for Johnny Cash and for Neil Young, Jefferson Airplane. So many people he wrote for. Very talented artists. And so he's been giving me songwriting advice. Wow. And so I've been really working on that kind of singer-songwriter aspect of what makes us artists and musicians. And through that, I find that I'm getting a little bit more creative with my techniques, and I'm not boxing myself in. I don't write a piece of music now and say, this is what it has to be. I write a piece of music and then I say, oh, that's nice. Now, how can I maybe make that more true to what I'm trying to say, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I always find that interesting with instrumental music, how much can actually be said.
Yeah, for sure, you know, and instrumental music has treated me really well. One thing I like about it is that it creates a universal language. And so, I used to street perform a lot, particularly in downtown Asheville, North Carolina, where we're filming this, actually. Not in downtown, I guess, on the outskirts. And through the street performing, I would find that maybe 100 or 200 people would start crowding around when I'm playing. And they're all different walks of life from all over the world. They have their walls up. But the music grabs them, and so they all start focusing on this, and they start letting their walls down. And all of a sudden, there's a group of people from all walks of life of the world floating up together through the catalyst that is this instrumental violin music. It's really powerful energetics.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's really cool because, there's no language in it. There's no specific approach where if you don't understand what's being said, you're kind of missing out on it. If you just hear it, it's more of a feeling than anything.
Well, and it also creates the ability for people to interpret individually. And so everybody has their own path in life, and they might come and pass by my music, whether it be on the street or on iTunes or in a venue, and it will interpret to them in a different way than it will for someone else. And that's really powerful. With songwriting, with words, I find that I have a little bit more control over the message that I'm putting across. But ultimately, once I put it out into the world, it's not really mine anymore. Now it's like a collective effort, because now people are listening to it, interpreting it, using it to process through emotions in their life, whatnot.
Yeah, that's powerful. So how did you get into looping and doing all the crazy effects stuff, especially as a violin player?
Well, in my early 20s, I stopped playing classically. I remember the moment I tried to put a string quartet together in Gainesville, Florida, and I put up flyers around town with little tear-offs, anybody want to play music with me? And, nothing. It was like crickets. And I was getting into what you'd say more modern pop music, listening to a lot of, like Beatles, Bell and Sebastian, Zeppelin, all over the place, but more time frames, many different time frames. And then I started to get into a lot more blues and jazz. And so I was taking a step away from that instrumental classical world. I even played bass guitar in a punk rock band.
Oh, right.
Covered some Cream and whatnot, and so as time went on, I found that I wanted to be able to compose music that was in my head and share it with the world. But I didn't know how to do that without collaborating with 20 or 30 people at one time, which is really hard to do. And so I found out about looping because I saw a video online of some guy. You can look it up if there's any violinists out there. Ed Allen Johnson, busking Chester or Chesterfield or something. I think it's Chester. It's in Europe. It's a town. There's this crazy guy with long hair playing a violin that looks like a crazy purple guitar, like a V-neck type of thing. And he's just shredding it with all these crazy effects. He's probably done a lot of drugs in his day. And I saw this video and it just changed my life because I was like, what is this guy doing? I have no idea. And he was both looping and putting a violin through pedals, which to me was a new concept. And once I figured that out, I really went with it. And I think that as time went on, what distinguished me maybe from other looping artists is that I spent a lot of time behind closed doors crafting material. And to me, it's not about creating this perfect little thing that could easily break or something. No, because it's organic. Shows are organic. But I spent a lot of time crafting my sound and crafting the loop pedal even, and learning how to use it, which I don't know if other artists, there are many talented artists out there that put a lot of time into that, but when it comes to the electric violin and my very opinionated nature about it, I apologize in advance. It's oftentimes artists don't take the time to get that sound of the violin, because even though it's an electric as opposed to an acoustic, you have to like shape it because it doesn't have the body of the violin. Like we're looking at my violin right now, there's no body to resonate the sound.
Not at all.
So how do I recreate that? I take the time to properly EQ my sound and do other reverb and whatnot to get that lush violin sound, and then I go from there. But I've also been looping for, gosh, how long now? Over 10 years, 11 years roughly. Yeah.
So you saw that video 10, 11 years ago or more?
Pretty much, yeah.
It's so crazy that, like, 10, 11 years before that never could have happened,
That's what blows my mind. And there's a movie called, I think it's called Midnight in Paris, and it's about living in a different time period than you're currently in. And the conclusion of the movie, it's an old Woody Allen flick, is that it's better to be present in the time you're in than to want to live in a different time. But there was a period in my life where I was like, man, why didn't I find out about the looping technology when it first came out? Yeah, because it hasn't been out that long, but I missed the boat on that. And for some reason, I needed to find it in my early 20s. Yeah.
I mean, you're ahead of the game as far as, I recently, within the last year, I've always liked looping.
Yeah.
It was kind of just like a thing for me. I was like, oh, that's fun, this little lick. And recently, because I've been playing more solo shows outside of my band, Life Like Water, I was like, how do I make this a fuller sound? How do I do this? And I was like, oh, a loop pedal, and some effects and things. So, it's when I turn to an artist who, you look like you have a spaceship set up here in front of me. It's ridiculous. All your pedals and blinking lights and stuff. It's, where you're at is so advanced.
But I didn't start with that,
For sure.
If you went back years ago, you saw me with a tiny little loop pedal. And I highly recommend when people get into looping to start with that, because the complicated nature of a loop pedal that has, if you look at my loop pedal right now, it has 12 foot pedals, of which if you watch me play a song, I probably use all 12 of those individual buttons for my feet in one song. And I built up to that, so it's easy to me. But also, I don't learn everything that the pedal can do because they give it too many bells and whistles.
Yeah.
And I know I only need essentials for my music, for what I create for the world, because ultimately it's just a piece of technology. It's a tool. So is the violin. In a sense, it's like an extension of myself as a tool to help me communicate with the world.
Yeah.
And I'm communicating medicine at that point. At least that's my goal. I don't always do it. But.
Yeah. When you're on it and you're feeling it. And...
Yeah. Oh, and I wanted to tell you, because you said you're getting into looping, and for any other looping artist that's listening to this, oh man, I just had an epiphany. I'm Irish, so I'm going to bounce around. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm really into master numbers, and I've been playing the violin for 22 years. I've been looping for 11 years. I'm 33 years old. There's a lot of master numbers this year. This is a powerful year for me, I think. I'm excited about it. But I wanted to tell you about looping because I've been looping for 11 years.
Yeah.
When you get into it at first, a trap that a lot of musicians fall for is to just layer a rhythm thing or something over the background and then solo over the top of it. Mm-hmm. And if you were to record yourself on a camera and watch that back, you'd see yourself take 3 or 4 minutes to get your loop going.
Yeah.
And then you'd solo over the top for another 5 or 10 minutes. And so then you end up with a 10 or 15 minute song that really isn't that good.
Yeah.
It's like when you do something, you do drugs and play music, and then the next morning you listen back and you're like, wow, that was not what I thought it was.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of looping artists don't figure how to treat it like a composition tool. Write good music with it. Think about the time it takes to layer your loop initially in the song. That's time that somebody has to stand there and listen at a show.
Yeah.
And don't just take 4 minutes to build up a loop and then solo over the top of that for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Now I'm exaggerating. But that's just some advice, because I've seen a lot of good looping and a lot of bad looping.
Yeah. No, I've totally already encountered that with just going to lay down a loop and wanting to play over it, but you need to spend this much time to get the loop in, and then it's where do you come back into it? If you don't have a seamless part where you jump right into the next melody and stuff. And
of course,
I would love to have you play a piece if you're down, and maybe beforehand you could just talk about your gear a little bit.
Yeah, I'd love to play something. I'm using a mixture of gear, and I'm incorporating some new stuff. I'm looking over there right now, and I have a lot of Boss or Roland pedals. And that's changing slowly because I'm now adding in some new technology that I'm working on, but that's a bit of a secret that'll come out soon when I do some new shows.
Nice.
But what I've got is that basically I'm take my electric violin, which is just like an electric guitar. You know, you don't need the body. You've got pickups in the bridge, just like an electric guitar. I plug that into a preamp. I run that through a bass pedal. I run all that through my multi-effects pedal. And, you know, if people like to nerd out on pedals, right, and I can totally go there. I know a lot about pedals, but for me, instead of doing a pedal board where I have like 5 or 6 individual pedals, I do a multi-effects pedal because I can program the buttons. So I can have one button that I press do 2 or 3 things, or I can attach a control pedal that gives me additional features. Or the expression pedal that's all on this multi-effects pedal, I can control what it does when I use that. And I find that having that kind of control is really great for the live show. It lets me really craft my sound. If I need to press 3 things at once, how do I do that on an analog setup?
Yeah.
That's why I use multi-effects. And I do some analog stuff. Obviously, I have an analog bass pedal. I have a really cool Eventide pedal, the H9, that I'm working on some really cool stuff with that I wish I could play some of that for you today, but I just don't have it set up at the moment. Yeah. And then all that runs through a bass pedal, or I'm sorry, not a bass, through a loop pedal, really big loop pedal. I started with a small one years ago, and I worked my way up. This is the Boss RC50. I highly recommend it. There's a newer one called the 505, which is great for beatboxers and singers, and then there's another one called the RC300, which is an advanced version of this. And I tell people, don't buy the new one, buy the RC50. The 50 is where they figured it out and got it right. The 300 was them trying to make more money and put more features on it, and it's like a waste of money.
Yeah.
So this is like the pinnacle of looping technology in my book.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I've got some control pedals that I use just to give myself some versatility. Have you heard the concept of 10,000 hours, the Indian concept, kind of? I say Indian, I'm being very base, but it's an Eastern philosophy, and you're shaking your head yes.
Yeah.
But for the listeners, we'll say where if you're working on a craft, like let's say the violin, or you play the guitar, right, David? And so if you play that instrument for 10,000 hours, or if you paint for 10,000 hours, or maybe even if you write novels for 10,000 hours, then supposedly that's a way to master a craft. You have to consciously work when you're working, but even just going through the motions and the muscle memory and the spirit work that you're doing with it, it's very powerful. And so I started playing a lot of shows, about 300 a year. It was crazy. I almost burnt out. I was playing so many shows. And so I got a lot of thousands of hours in on these pedals, the loop pedal alone. And I found that after so many, like hundreds, if not thousands of hours, I started to be able to like do things with a loop pedal that I'd never been able to do before. And it was like teaching my feet how to do things. People say I dance with the pedals, and it's just like it's like second nature. And when I street performed and there's like an ambulance going by and you're in the middle of a song and there's 150 people crowded around you, plus some homeless people around the fringes trying to like beg for change, like it's a lot of energy and a lot of noise surrounding you, and to be able to still lock in on a loop, it's a powerful skill.
Totally, yeah. It's a lot of focus, a lot of attention. I mean, just knowing, okay, this is the moment, this has got to be hit. And this is exactly the effect I need. This is exactly where I need to press. Wow. Shredding.
While shredding, exactly.
Laying down the right kind of harmonies, all that stuff. Like, I mean, music, and I've heard it said, music activates more areas in your brain than any other activity, and especially if you play and sing. But I can imagine that playing and looping is probably another level of that, a new study they got to do.
Yeah.
There's so much going on.
Well, and I've found that, like, with the music that I've created for the world, I had this one show, I'll give you an example of what I'm trying to explain. I had a kid that was probably 15, 16 years old come up to me after a show, and he said that the music brought him to tears. And I thought, a teenager in the middle of a room with a bunch of people cried? Like, wow, that's powerful. And then that same night, and I was in my 20s, like mid-20s, and I had a mohawk, and I was like wearing this like punk vest and stuff. This old woman comes, that same show, probably in her 70s, and she walks up and she goes, I just wanted to let you know that your music was beautiful. Wow. And I thought, wow, I just reached a 70-year-old woman and a 15-year-old boy in the same performance, like I must be doing something right to follow my purpose in this life, you know?
Definitely. Well, I love that you can gauge, you know, people's ideas of success may vary, or, you know, even to the degree of a single show or performance, but to gauge it upon like somebody's emotional response, you know, not about how much money you made or how, you know, even how many people were there or something.
The money doesn't matter at the end of the day. What really matters is, are we helping our fellow humankind and just the earth? I mean, just like, I hope that the medicine I bring to the world is enough, and I've been supported by the communities around me through that work. Yeah.
And that's what, you know, my show is just geared towards. And I'm always trying to like teeter on the edge of like what I'm really trying to say, because it's like this gray area. Like, I'm not talking about like some dogmatic spiritualized thing. I'm talking about this real live organic experience that when you connect with it through creativity, it's a spiritual experience. You know, like you have this true like awakening or epiphany or whatever it is for you.
Creative awakening, maybe?
Perhaps. But when people connect with it, they get it, you know? And that's why I love having these talks, because when I get really into it with somebody and they start like lighting up about their performance, you know, you can see it. It's like, that is what I mean about the spiritual side connecting with the creative side. And like, there's nothing more than that. You know, it doesn't have to get complicated. It doesn't have to get dogmatic. It doesn't have to have any kind of like religious overtone to it at all. It's this like purely organic human experience but it's shared with, you know,
universal.
Anything that can be connected to it, you know, like it's a deep concept. We don't need to go too deep into it.
Well, what you're touching on though is like it's deeper meaning for me, because especially it's like even more so in this day and age as technology becomes more and more intertwined in our lives. Like the live show is that much more important and necessary for us. And I like to create events with music. When I book other bands with me and play shows, I'm thinking about, well, what kind of atmosphere am I creating? If somebody walks into this space and they've had a rough day, they walk into the atmosphere that we curated for this show. Are they going to leave slightly changed? Are they going to process through what their day was, those tough emotions that they came up against and those tough challenges? Are they going to be able to work through some of that through what we're offering at these shows? And to me, like, that's the goal. And that's why the live show is so important. And no matter how fancy technology gets and laptops and everything, and the lack of, say, humans playing music or connecting in that way, like, there'll always be that live show to do that. Even with the laptop artists, you know, I just told you I played an EDM show the other night, and like I tell you, it was the next generation of, you know, 21-year-olds, we'll say, and they were connecting and they were processing emotions, and it was beautiful to see.
I've definitely had that experience with electronic music. Has never been my thing. And I was actually very against it when I was younger, because I was into, you know, first it was like punk rock and things like that, but then it was like folk music and traditional music, and anything electronic seemed like it was soulless to me, you know, just because I was ignorant. But then I started listening to it and like going to the shows and like connecting with the community and stuff like that, and it's still not my preferred choice, but there is a lot of heart that goes into that, and a lot of it is like the intention behind it, the community behind it. And once you get past all the drugs and the craziness and all that stuff that tends to go with it too, which, you know, is its own thing, but there is this deeper sense that like technology and like the organic creative process, you know, it's I mean, what you have going on here is this like immensely technological thing blending with the traditional sound of the violin.
Well, and everything I do is done live. Nothing's pre-recorded. So I've definitely been in that boat of having an opinion about electronic music, and that's changed over the years. And, you know, like when I got my start playing the looping music in Gainesville, Florida is an amazing town to start a band. You can play a house show on a Monday night and like 20 people will show up and they'll bring their own beer. It's great, you know. I would, what am I trying to say about Gainesville, Florida? Gosh. I used to open up for punk bands. That's how I kind of got my start. And it was the scene in Gainesville. The Fest is there every year. And it's like the punk scene there has kind of come in and out. But now the Fest is kind of like solidified what the punk scene is in Gainesville. And so it's just funny, And so that's kind of how I got my start. And so I found that like a lot of punk artists, I think people outside of the punk world don't realize how not versatile, but open-minded the punk scene is. Like that's part of the core of what punk is like we're willing to listen to almost anything and take it anywhere and go as hard as you want, and we'll be there with you. And so it was a really supportive start to my career, although I don't really play with many punk bands these days.
Taste change, all those things. Well, would you be down to play something?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'll play something here on the electric violin for you.
I'll just make sure the mic's in a good range. We got all his stuff set up with the mic and everything, and an amp set up over here, so we're just going to make sure the levels aren't crazy, but it should be good because I got the mic facing away from the amp.
Wonderful. Should I just start playing? Or?
You want to just give it a real quick little test?
Sure.
Volume test? Yeah, we're good.
Sweet.
Yeah, you play away. Play at will. Beautiful, man. So much going on. For anyone that's watching on the Facebook, I'm just gonna give a little look at the
pedals.
Pedals.
Okay, so here for everybody on Facebook, this is your mind, and this is your brain, and this is your brain on drugs. That's what I decided. It's my sock joke of the day.
I love it. Gotta have a good sock joke. Yeah, that's good stuff right there.
I really just made that one up for your podcast today. I thought, this is the vibe I'm feeling. Something upbeat and sparkly here towards the end of winter time, you know.
The song?
Yeah. Well, it's the end of winter, early spring, and it's nice to, feel a little fire in it, you know.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. It's been a tough winter, I gotta say, for a lot of people. And 2019, that's the year it is right now for all you future listeners, has been a powerful start. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's also, like we said, it's Valentine's Day.
It is Valentine's Day. I am recently single, and I'm feeling that pretty heavy. But it's great for songwriting, though.
You know, I was hoping we could maybe get into that a little bit in connection with what we were saying. Not the breakup thing. Sorry about that. But you know, talking about like when music kind of like jumps outside of just this artistic act or like this fun pastime, and it kind of becomes this like true like spiritual experience, you know, and it becomes this really deep, intimate thing that has the power to shift the way you see the world. Like,
yeah.
What about your music has done that for you in a way that, like, you were talking about relationships and nobody could get as close to you as your fiddle can. You know? Like, I don't want to look at the negative side of it, but maybe the positive side of it. You know, like how is the love of music something that can really transform?
Well,
in your opinion,
gosh, to let something in so closely, which I think people struggle with. Think of all the conditioning we have from our past that makes us put up walls in our lives, and so just that alone, the fact that I allow some sort of vessel to communicate some of my deeper emotions, and God, there's so much to say on this topic. I could just bounce around so much. The violin itself mimics the human voice so well, and I think people connect with that strongly, and I know I do. And people really connect with, I'm going to get back to me. I'm not just talking about other people, but people, I think, connect with artists that are willing to really put it out there. What some people call that put your heart on your sleeve. But more so, it's just about like being honest and like giving it your all, whatever that means to you. And so for me, like I'm a super fiery person, and I have a lot of energy that I wouldn't know what to do with, and I have a lot of emotions. Take me to the movie. If it's a decent movie, I'll probably cry. And I'm not ashamed of that either, you know. And I grew up around women, but I'm also very masculine, and I try to find that balance between that masculinity and divine feminine in this day and age. And through all of that, the music provides a way for me to process emotion. So I used to think of it as the selfish thing, because I would play music on the violin in particular, and it would be my medicine that would heal me, and I would play it for people and they would get what they got from it, but I would be selfishly giving myself medicine because I would go crazy if I didn't play music. And as time went on, though, I started getting into energetics and toroidal fields, for example, which is like kind of like an apple core. If you think like you push energy out, up over you, like it's in the shape of an apple, a curve, and it flows through the people that are connecting and listening, and then they pass it back through. It comes kind of underneath like an apple core through me, and so then we're creating this like loop of energy, and I'm sending energy out into the world, positive energy. Even if it's a dark message that I'm communicating, it's still positive because I'm using music in a healthy way to shed light on the topic or just process in general, which is hard to do for a lot of people, including myself. I'm a stubborn guy, and it can be hard to process emotions, but music creates that vessel for me. Yeah. And so all that added together and so much more makes it such an important part of my life and what I do. And now I'm realizing more and more as I get older how I have to like deal with my shit and get my shit out of the way so I can keep doing this, because it's bigger than me. And it took me years to realize how much bigger it was. People with cancer telling me that my music has helped them transform and work through their recovery process. People in there's just so many stories that people have shared with me that have helped me kind of get out of myself and get away from like all the burdens that we have as struggling artists. There's so much shadow work in there.
It definitely is.
Carl Jung would have a field day.
Yeah, it's such a rich topic, and I get into it on my show all the time about how music in particular, but really any creative act, it's like this bridge that can be built from your deep hurt, pain, or whatever it is that you need to process that you just can't seem to go through. You know, you can't seem to bring it out. You know, it's like a relationship falls apart, or you know, I'm a father. I have a 5-year-old daughter, and it's like parenting is one of the most insane things. Like your ups and downs with emotions are like the deepest love you can imagine, but then also like the most insane frustration you can comprehend, you know, within minutes of each other, sometimes like on top of each other. And it's so hard to process it and so hard to talk about it. But through music, we often can express that, you know, in this really organic, beautiful way, you know, like what you just did there, which took you years of practice, obviously. People always need to remember that. But when you have the technique down, you can just so effortlessly dance through it, and here's this feeling.
And if you're sensitive enough, then you can feed off of what's going on around you and the energies, which is almost like a separate thing from being a musician. It's part of it, but it's like it's one thing to learn, like you said, all the years of effort to be able to just do something like that, but it's another thing then to be sensitive enough to read the dynamics around you in your environment.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful one, which I'm exploring more and more, especially with the live show.
Yeah.
Because that creates the opportunity for transformation like nothing before. And then the music at the end ends up being just a catalyst. Like it's a vessel, and it's all these beautiful things like you just wove so wonderfully. And then when it's all said and done and there's processing that has occurred, you look and it's like the music is just this like residue of a catalyst that it was to just create the process or the whatever it is that's occurring in the first place, you know.
Yeah, it's a feedback loop. Or it's like the toroidal
field. Yeah, like, I've really been into that because I used to go home exhausted. I'd street perform on a Saturday in Asheville, and I'd get home at like 11, 12 o'clock at night, completely exhausted, counting my dollar bills. Every dollar I'd say, thank you, thank you, thank you, because every dollar was someone thanking me for what I was giving them. But I was so exhausted. And then I got into that toroidal fields and the toroidal loop, and all of a sudden I'd come home jazzed up and I wouldn't be tired anymore because I allowed the energy to flow back through me.
Those are some of my favorite experiences when I've performed, or when I have sometimes podcast interviews, or just good relationships, conversations and stuff, and I literally get so energized I can't sleep afterwards.
Yeah,
I've played shows for 3-4 hours plus a day of travel and different things like that, got off stage, and it's 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I can't sleep because I have so much energy just rushing through me. And it's not, you know, it's not alcohol or drug fueled. It's not like, you know, it's not
straight edge.
It's nothing external, you know. It's this pure energy that comes just from doing what you love and the reciprocity of it.
I wish everybody in this world did what they loved doing, and I bet the world could thrive just fine with everybody doing what they were passionate about, because everybody's so unique and wants to do different things. There's people that are like super passionate about like shipping packages across the world, so you don't got to worry that you're not going to have your UPS employee, you know, like there's people like that out there that they're just really into like systems. Or there's people that are super passionate about music or cooking or healing others through, you know, Western medicine. Like I wish that people took more risks and put themselves out there, because what's that quote? It's oftentimes Nelson Mandela is quoted as it, but I think it's someone else who actually said it about I'm going to paraphrase it because I'm not going to get it right, but it's about there's no good that you bring to the world by being a lesser version of yourself. You don't help yourself, and you don't help anybody around you. And another quote I just saw from Victor Wooten. I really like Victor Wooten, the bass player. And he said, a paraphrase again, it's from his TED Talk, but he said, if somebody puts you up on a pedestal, don't get off the pedestal feeling all humble about it. No, stand up there proud and realize that they put you up on a pedestal, so that's as far as they can see, as high as they can see. So then take your hand down and grab theirs and pull them up with you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, Victor Wooten's the man.
Yeah, we could do quotes all day when I was a kid. I used to put quotes all over my wall to motivate me.
I used to cut them out and put them in my journal.
Yes, I love it.
Philosophy and, you know, spirituality, all that good stuff. I would be lying if I say I do.
Yeah,
I write them down now.
I just don't hang them on the wall like I used to. Well, now that I'm not dating anymore, I could hang them on the wall.
Oh, there you go. You got all the space you need. Yeah, so we've been going for a little while now, and I want to be respectful of your time, and I also have a time constraint today too,
and all the listeners too,
and listeners. But So you were talking about how you're a full-time musician and you're into, you're showing me these books that you're reading and like different strategies and things like that. I wonder if you could talk about that, like at what point you made that conscious decision to become a professional musician.
Well, nobody can see it, but you can. When I got this tattoo behind my ear, that was the point.
I noticed that earlier.
It's a treble clef right behind my right ear, a small one. It's the only tattoo I have, and I have one foot in the very creative world, and then I have one foot in the very, like, I love logic puzzles world. I like doing things really well. And it's not an ego thing. I just have a really strong work ethic. And I learned it when I finally met my father. When I was in my 20s, I met my real biological father because I grew up with the two mothers. And did we already talk about that on the podcast? I don't know. We were talking before the podcast. You
mentioned that you grew
and
up
so I met my dad, and he's a master carpenter, and I'm helping him on a job. And I need to sweep up and clean at the end. And he says, you sweep this. And I start sweeping. He's like, no, you're getting dust everywhere. And he shows me how to sweep properly in a very efficient way. And I was like, yeah, it makes sense. Like, you sweep like this and there's not dust going everywhere. When you're working a job like that, like, it makes the difference.
Yeah.
And what that story is an analogy of is just that I love doing things well. And if I'm going to do something like play music, I'd like to do it in a way that it serves me and is sustainable. And so I am very creative, and it's all about the art and the emotion and the connection, and money means nothing. But then I have my other side, which is like, still doesn't care about the money, but knows that to sustain this, to break a string at every show, people see me break hairs on the bow all the time. I have to rehair those bows or buy new bows like all the time. That's cost money. I have to feed myself. I have to pay gas to get to the next town if I'm on tour. All that stuff. And so I've kind of figured out how to be, professional about it and what I need, like if you're going to go on tour, if you're a musician and you're listening and you're like, wow, I'd love to be a full-time musician. 2/3 of my income is from CD sales. It's 2019 and still 2/3 of my income is from merch and mostly CDs. Like, don't think people don't buy CDs. And even if they're not going to listen to it, they just buy it because they want to support you. Like, what is it? I learned this on the streets. If somebody walks up to you and you're giving them music and they're like, somehow they're connected really strong and they're like, in tears or whatever. All they have to offer you at that point is their attention, their time, which is a big one. Or maybe they want to give you some money because it's just you have a tip jar. They thank you for what you're offering the world. If they see a CD, they're like, oh, I want to share this with someone else. Or you know what? I might just put this in my car and never listen to it. But you know what? I'm going to give him $10 or $15 anyways because I love what he's doing and I want them to keep doing it and sharing it with the world.
Totally.
And so that's kind of my philosophy behind. It's also like Radiohead. They weren't the first to do it, but they made a big stink about it, or the press made a big stink about it on their behalf. How they gave away an album for free and then ended up like making a ton of money off of it. Seth Godin, an amazing guy that I read a lot of, did that with a book. He released a book for free and made more money on it than had he not and done it with a publisher. And it's been in like 30 languages and it was like a bestseller on Amazon. And so that's my philosophy. Like, if you want to know how I play music, I'll show you. If you want my music and you don't have much money, I'll give you a CD for free. I don't care. Like at the end of the day, it's about connecting. And I know that the community around me will support me. I guess that's kind of some of the deeper philosophy instead of the nitty gritty. Anybody, my band, to all my dear friends, anybody can reach out. I'm happy to share books. I read all the time about the music business and modern marketing techniques, and that's just because I like it. And it's something that I find fascinating, and I like having conversations like this with other artists.
Yeah.
And popcorning ideas and just sharing. I mean, I used to tour full time on the road. I just lived out of my car, and that was the decision I made. I was in my 20s, working a job. It wasn't a bad job, but I was in a college town. People like to drink. I don't really like to drink. I loved playing music. I was waterlocked because I was in Florida, Central Florida, North Central Florida in Gainesville. And there's a reason why a lot of big bands don't come down to Florida, because you can't go anywhere. You go east, west, or south, and you hit water. Like, it's not very good for touring. And so I had to make that decision to take that risk. So I quit my job. I did a Kickstarter campaign online, raised a little bit of money through the campaign to get my merch going and finish the album I was working on. Booked some shows 2 or 3 months ahead, and I hit the road. And then I just stayed on the road for about a year solid. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to be a full-time musician, and I'm not going to let anybody else tell me what that means or why I can or cannot do it or when I can and cannot do it. I'm going to do it now. And I did. And that was a game changer for me.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
I think a lot of people, I don't know, this is an assumption, which is a dangerous path with assumptions, but a lot of people sit around maybe waiting for someone to tell them that it's okay to follow their dreams.
I think most of us do.
Yeah, and
we're kind of conditioned.
Yeah, we are kind of conditioned, and there was a point in my 20s when I was like all like on fire, and I'm a fiery guy, but in my 20s, boy, whew. And I was angry at not the world. I don't know where the anger was pointed at, but I was like, I was just like, I got fed up with caring about what people thought of me. I got fed up with society and culture, honestly. And so I got to this place, and it's not necessarily like from a Buddhist perspective, it's not the healthiest way to go about it, but it's what I needed, because I got so angry that I stopped caring. And once I stopped caring, I started doing whatever I wanted. And once I started doing whatever I wanted, people started paying attention to me. It was the weirdest like catch-22 that you'd ever see.
Yeah.
It's like you thought that you needed to like be mainstream for people to this and that. And it's like, no, what I needed to be was be weird and be myself and get a small amount of people that cared about what I was doing, because I was being real all of a sudden.
That's when you're making authentic community.
Authenticity is a big conversation to have in the 21st century. Whew.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think that's all great stuff. I have such a deep resonance with that. In my early 20s, I did something very similar where I was very angry, very confused, and I literally dropped out of society, started traveling, living on the road, sleeping under bridges, camping in the woods, wherever it was. And there were two things that I learned about it that were, well, there was a lot of things I learned about it, but in the perspective of the music and business and stuff was I really connected with my creativity in that way, because I stopped caring about what I thought I should play or how I should be or anything like that. But I also learned that not caring will only get you so far.
I learned that too.
Connecting those dots where it's like, okay, stop caring about this, but you also have to be a little bit concerned.
There's deeper stuff and there's spirit work to be done. Totally. Exactly. But it's a process, and it's like one stage of a multi-stage process.
Yeah. And we're young, we're learning, and like, even as creative people, as professional people, like I said, with these conversations, the more I talk to people, the more I see, like, we're all on the same path, more or less, trying to make it work, trying to be authentic, hopefully most of us, and just trying to find that balance of like, this is who I am, now how do I sustain that in this crazy twisted world of ours. And I'm always so inspired when I connect with people who are doing that and getting by,
and then taking what you said and looking at it from a marketing perspective. And I got this straight from Seth Godin. It's not my own idea, but this is who we are, and this is what we do. And all of a sudden, you're creating a movement, and you're creating what Seth calls a small, viable audience. He says, look for your smallest viable audience. Because, that's what you're doing. You're saying to the world, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. Anybody out there that wants to share this with me, just like your podcast is beautiful. And the people that are listening to it are looking for that deeper creative connection. Or I can only make assumptions about your listeners.
Yeah, well, me too. But that's the thing. I think that says it perfectly. Like finding like the small community that wants to connect with it. Like this is like a very infant thing, and I jumped into it headlong, not knowing anything about it. Yeah, never done it before. Didn't know anything.
That's
about
the way to do it, though. Just do it. Exactly. Literally, get up, make a ruckus, make it happen, and. What's that saying? Do now, apologize later, or something. Yeah. It's like, it's not about breaking laws per se. Yeah. It's just about like don't worry about like your family and your friends that are gonna maybe like have opinions and give you like, God, that so many people can have opinions about everybody. This is why when I release a piece of music, like, it's not really mine anymore, because everybody has an opinion about it. Yeah. And that's perfectly fine, but like that can hold us back because we can be afraid of not being accepted. And that's what I got angry at, and it's wrong, and maybe that's a tool. We could get into conspiracy theories at that point, because like it's probably something that is used to kind of hold people down and back from achieving their dreams, sadly.
there's definitely deeper levels we can go into with that stuff and some of that darker stuff. But I think
that's for a different podcast.
I think fundamentally though that it is a real thing that like not the dark forces of it, but more of the side of like our system is not structured around empathy or compassion or true authentic expression. Like we're working against that, and to try and use what you're doing, your passion, your creativity, and to not only connect with people but also make a living off of it. It's an uphill battle, but forming those communities, making these kind of connections, that's where it happens. And that's the more I talk to people, I'm like, oh well, I would just like the last conversation I had, this Drew from Satsang, he was talking about meeting Michael Franti and how random it was. He just like threw all his money in to fly down to Florida to open up for him just under the hope that he'd see them open. And it worked out. And it changed the game for him.
And Michael seems like a really cool guy. I bet that's a good story. You know what? And in fact, I haven't listened. That podcast is up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to listen to that one because that's your newest one, I think. And I haven't had a chance to listen yet. And that sounds like a really cool story.
It is, yeah. And I meet people with stories like that all the time.
Well,
pursuing their
take
dreams.
Chances. And it's a lot about trust. Mm-hmm. And so I'm recently single and a lot that happened. And we're recording this on Valentine's Day. And a lot of what happened in that last relationship was trust issues. And music, I find with in particular when I work with other musical artists, I play with a drummer a lot, for example. It's like a relationship, just like a romantic encounter. In a lot of ways, you can see the it's wild if you make a list of comparisons, and it's just really powerful. We're both talking about quotes earlier. One of my favorite quotes is a Gandhi one, be the change you wish to see in the world. And that's what we're talking about here. Like, just be. And it's okay to, like, talk about it and think about it, but it's so easy to get caught up in that or to hold space for fear where you talk about it, but that initial jump. But I guess the goal is to jump first and trust that there's going to be somewhere for you to land. And what I've found is as long as I take the jump, there's always somewhere for me to land. It might not be what I thought it was going to be, but it always is getting me that much closer to wherever that sparkly light off in the distance is that I have visioned in my soul.
This is a very dangerous word to use, but the word faith,
or manifestation.
It's really similar.
It gets really spiritual very quickly, which is dangerous because a lot of people then put up walls.
Exactly, and it's not intended to. But I actually recently had a very profound experience with that word, where it had a whole new meaning for me because it was having faith in yourself and having faith in your abilities and having faith in the fact that there are people out there who care and that can understand and connect. Like just doing it and diving in.
And are you capable of manifesting your dreams into a reality? Because I think we all are. I'm young. Yeah. I don't know how old my soul is, but I'm pretty sure we're all capable of manifesting our dreams if we allow it.
Speculation, but we'll go with it. We'll go with it because
my gosh.
These are my favorite conversations to have because it's just like we don't know. It's mystery, and that's what makes it so beautiful, and that's what keeps me rolling with these conversations. And would you be down to play one last piece?
Oh, I'd love
before we wrap this up.
Maybe we'll bring it down a notch.
Absolutely.
For the end here. Short story for you here. When I street performed a lot for years in downtown Asheville, which I highly recommend to artists. If you really feel like you need a kick in the butt as an artist, and you just feel like you're really ready to take it on, go to New Orleans and street perform. You got to squat the spots at 11 o'clock at night just to play the next day, and it is a rough crowd. And the people are beautiful, and there's so much community there, but it is. Street performing in a place like New Orleans is a spiritual experience, to say the least. And so in Asheville, I would play a really high energy song, and I'd get a big crowd formed, and then I'd say, okay, how about you guys tell me, do you want to take it down a notch, or do you want another, like, balls to the walls, high energy? And every single time, high energy. It's like they just want you to, like, rip their faces off or melt their faces off or whatever. And so, but there's a lot of dynamics and beauty and quieter stuff and exploration that you can't do in places like the streets.
Yeah, totally. So, it has its limitations.
So yeah, I'll hop over to the violin here and give you guys one more piece to finish off this podcast.
Awesome, man.
Sounds great.
I'm super grateful for this interview and look forward to hearing this next piece. That's really nice. I like that. It's got a good feel to it.
Cool.
I really like the fact that with this podcast, because I have my microphone on the floor, I'm sure we're going to hear you dancing around, hitting each one of those pedals and clicking them. It's going to be a really nice little contribution to the music in such an intimate setting.
Very rhythmic, yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Well, I really appreciate this, man. It was a great conversation. Got into a lot of good stuff. Thank you for sharing your art with me and with
It's been a
all the
pleasure.
listeners. And yeah, it's cool to move through these different things with my podcast and to touch into different genres and stuff. And like I get to have like a personal concert sitting here. Like I'm sitting on the futon just chilling. We're up in this little attic space. And, so yeah, for me personally, selfishly, maybe I'm very grateful, and I know anyone listening is going to really enjoy it too.
Well,
so.
I'm very grateful too. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Definitely. Man. Well, thanks everyone for listening. We will catch you next time.